go ahead and try that.
Okay. Is it YouTube that they can hear
Yeah,
us?
YouTube. Shelby just let me know.
Any YouTube viewers, can you hear us?
Hopefully they can. I would
Hopefully
say
they can.
let's keep
Okay.
going, and then we'll
Yeah.
we'll see if we
Here,
hear back.
I'll
from
turn the
folks.
volume up, see if I can hear.
Okay. Okay, so again, this is Liam with Planning and Building. So a bit of background on this project. On March 14th of 2024, the Coastal Permit Administrator approved two CDPs on this property, CDP 2023-18 and 2023-19. The first CDP authorized the installation of a new accessory dwelling unit among a few other elements. And the second CDP authorized the drilling of 4 new wells and associated trenching and several other improvements to the existing single-family residence. On April 16th of 2024, the Coastal Permit Administrator's decision was appealed to the Coastal Commission due to inconsistencies with environmentally sensitive habitat area, water supply, and geologic hazard policies. And this proposed modification was submitted to resolve the issues raised in the appeal, and it would modify the second CDP, which is CDP 23-19. The proposed changes to this CDP include the use of subsurface boring underneath the environmentally sensitive habitat area instead of direct trenching for the water lines. It would also restrict the drilling of additional wells to the minimum necessary to establish an adequate water supply. It would retain the existing water tank instead of removing it. It would remove the proposal to expand the gravel parking area. It would replace a sliding door on the existing residence, and it would install a deck over the replacement septic infrastructure. The applicant has since withdrawn the first CDP, CDP 2023-18, and because this CDP was appealed and the CPA's original action was stayed pending a decision by the Coastal Commission, the applicant's withdrawal of the CDP from Planning and Building Services would effectively eliminate the Commission's need to consider the appeal. However, California Code of Regulations Section 13116 notes that on withdrawal of all appeals on a matter, the action of the local government shall automatically become final. Therefore, to ensure that the Coastal Commission's eventual withdrawal of the appeal of CDP 2023-18 does not create any unintended consequences, staff is recommending a condition of approval that confirms that the approval of this modification would supersede and replace any entitlements sought by the original CDP 23-18, and that the CPA rescinds their former approval of CDP 2023-18. So one of the main issues with this current proposal is related to environmentally sensitive habitat or ESHA policies. The entire property is within ESHA or ESHA buffers, mostly coastal terrace prairie. And most of the proposed development would not impact ESHA because it would be located on the existing residence, such as the rear roof, the window replacement, solar panels, etc. However, other elements would either be located directly within ESHA or ESHA buffers, such as the new wells and the replacement septic system. As explained in the staff report, the location and scope of the improvements have been selected to minimize damage to ESHA. Normally, these improvements would not be allowed within ESHA or ESHA buffers, and staff would recommend denial of the proposal, but it's likely that such denial would result in an unconstitutional regulatory taking because it would significantly devalue the property by preventing maintenance of the existing residence. The existing septic system is falling into disrepair and the well has run dry, so prohibiting the property owner from replacing the septic system and establishing an adequate water supply to serve the existing residents would significantly devalue the property and interfere with the owner's investment-backed expectations in purchasing the property. So therefore, I'm recommending that some development be allowed within ESHA to avoid a taking. However, the project should still maximize consistency with ESHA policies. As such, several mitigation measures and conditions of approval would ensure that the project would simultaneously avoid a taking while minimizing environmental damage. For example, as I mentioned before, directional boring would be implemented to allow water lines to be placed underneath the root zone of the coastal terrace prairie. and only the minimum number of wells necessary to establish an adequate water supply would be allowed. An initial study was prepared for the project pursuant to CEQA, where it was found that some potentially significant impacts could occur, but those impacts could be mitigated to a less than significant level. Therefore, a mitigated negative declaration was prepared. And lastly, I'd just like to go over a memo that I prepared for the project to clarify a couple of things. First, the agent has requested that the project description be amended to allow the installation of a single 5,000 gallon water tank rather than two 2,500 gallon water tanks. And staff recommends that this change be approved because it would result in less grading, less visual impact, and would be located in the same area as the original two water tanks. Second, the archaeological and cultural resources section incorrectly states that no resources were found as a result of the survey that was conducted on the property. Rather, a prehistoric shell refuse site was encountered and an environmentally sensitive area was established around that site. However, the proposed project would not intersect with that site, and the recommended conditions of approval reflect the recommendations of the archaeologist, the Mendocino County Archaeological Commission, and the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians to avoid impacts to that site. And third, the agent has clarified that the originally submitted roof material was inadvertently swapped with the originally proposed material for the siding on the accessory dwelling unit. So the roof material would actually match the existing composite shingles rather than being cedar shingles. And the agent also clarified that the house value noted in the takings analysis section is slightly lower than the true value of the property. And lastly, there's a small correction to one of the informational sections in the mitigated negative declaration where an LCP policy was just cited incorrectly. So with that, I'm recommending that the CPA approve the project and adopt the mitigated negative declaration and findings and conditions of approval in the staff report with the recommended modifications from the memo. And that's all for me. I'm available for any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you for that presentation. Now I'll look to see if we have a representative of the application that wishes to speak on this item. And I see we have Amy Wynn who's raised her hand. Amy, please go ahead and state your name for the record and any comments you may have.
Thank you. Amy Wynn, Wynn Coastal Planning and Biology, agent for the applicant. And we have also the architect, Sam Waldman, is on the line. And Chi Sullivan and Chris Sullivan will be joining. They have had a conflict, so Chi should be on shortly. And thank you to staff for their thorough review of this project. We believe that we have an adequately well protected a project that adequately protects the coastal resources. And we appreciate the time back and forth with Liam and the agencies on this. I do have a correction on the memo that I'd like to, we just got the memo last night because of a delay on our end. And I want to make a correction to the memo or ask for a correction to the memo and then also propose a modification to condition number 14 and have a little bit of a longer narrative about that. When Chi Sullivan does get on to the Zoom, I would like very much for her to read a narrative that she's prepared about the history of her family on this property. This property basically has been in her family or her adopted family since the house was built. So it's a pretty neat story. So we'll hear that in a little bit. But first for the memo, regarding the project description of the one 5,000 gallon water tank versus two 2,500 gallon water tanks, our request actually was to have the option to do a single 5,000 gallon water tank or two 2,500 gallon water tanks. So we asked that the word "or" be included after that citation of the single 5,000 gallon water tank. That is our first request. And then our second request is regarding condition number 14. And I'll read that real quickly and then go into my questions and request for a a revision. So condition number 14 reads, this coastal development permit authorizes the drilling of the minimum number of test wells necessary to establish adequate water supply and the conversion of such test wells to production wells. Each well shall be tested prior to the drilling of any subsequent well. The wells shall be drilled and tested in accordance with the County of Mendocino Coastal Groundwater Development Guidelines. I'm all seeing my edit. Let's see. The testing shall occur within the dry season from August 20th to October 31st. If testing demonstrates that adequate water supply would be available, no additional wells shall be drilled. So we're fine with the basic premise of this condition. I have a question to the coastal permit administrator for interpretation of one part, and then a request for a modification to the language of that. So before I get into the modification, I'll ask my question about interpretation. So as we know, the County of Mendocino's interpretation of the coastal groundwater guidelines and how they apply to single-family residences or proposal of single-family residences on existing lots of record states that our coastal groundwater guidelines state that no investigation for water supply is required for individual residences on existing lot of record. And that's actually for when a house is proposed, of course. And certainly in this instance, we're looking to gain water security for an existing residence that's been permitted. So my basic premise, or my question to this CPA, is about how to interpret or how to determine what method of testing would be sufficient to determine whether we need to move forward to drill a second well, and hopefully we're good with just one. Believe me, everybody wants to just drill a single well and be done with it. But if we have to drill more than one well, we've got a really short time frame. One, in that we have this October to do it after the appeal period, and then two, coordination for getting a proof of water, if that's the most intense study, will be quite tricky, and also could potentially consume a lot of water unnecessarily before moving on to another test. So what I'm asking is if the CPA would agree that since no groundwater investigation is required for proposal for single-family residence on existing lots of record, I'm asking that the CPA concur with our team's interpretation that any investigation, any investigation by qualified professionals is sufficient to determine whether we have to move forward to a second well or not. And I'll get into further as to why in just a second. But the instance is, what if we drill that first well and the well drillers report clearly, or that initial well drillers test, 2 or 4 hours, illustrates that we've got less than half a gallon a minute. It's understood, and I went over this with Andy Kupchak from Ridham and Associates yesterday. It's common that a well driller's report or even the 4-hour test comes up with about half of the gallons per minute that a 17-hour proof of water test would have. So if we've drilled the first well and we do either that our initial pump test, or we do maybe perhaps a more aggressive 3 to 4 hour pump test that the well driller would do, and we're finding that we're not even sweeping past a half gallon, or we're just barely at a gallon, we want to be able to move forward with that demonstration of how much water is coming out. We want to know that that's sufficient to move to drilling a second hole if need be, and hopefully 2 would be all we'd need. Like I said, that nobody wants to drill more than one hole. They are quite expensive to do, and the choreography is tricky. I think that it's okay for this interpretation because in the groundwater guidelines, of course, as I said, the guidelines say no investigation is necessary for proposed, it doesn't say proposed, but for proposed individual residences on existing lots of record. So starting with 0. On that same page, which is page 3 of the groundwater guidelines, it says in the second line, it says the guidelines provided in this document outline in general the required testing and evaluation methods. So since environmental health does not have a requirement for a demonstration of adequate water for proposed or existing single family residences, there's leniency, the way I see it, in the county interpreting what method will work. So I don't think we need to change any language. I just want to have concurrence that we may be able to use the expertise of our well driller on site to move forward. And of course, the last sentence is, in special circumstances, due possibly to the size, nature, or location of a particular project, the Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors, or Coastal Commission, I would imagine the CPA by extension, may require more extensive groundwater investigation in addition to or in place of the requirements outlined in these guidelines. And so I point back to that the top of the page says no groundwater investigation is required. So with that, my first request on condition number 14 is just simply with regards to interpretation. May we use our well drillers' expertise to determine whether we need to move on and drill another well, and saving time, water, and cost. And then the second request comes to the time of year. And so for the second to last sentence, the testing shall occur within the dry season from August 20th to October 31st. We know, so I'm going to continue to point back to that there's no groundwater investigation required, but that anything more, we can require anything more. So we're in the realm of anything more, and that the guidelines are in general. We also know that, I'm requesting an edit to that language that says the coastal permit administrator may require testing to occur within the dry season from August 20th to the 31st, which would allow us, if we're bumped up to, let's say it's Halloween, the kids are out trick-or-treating, and we're like, this last well isn't this, let's say we're on well number 3 and it isn't, horrors. Our well driller is going to be ready to hit the ground as soon as we're done with our appeal period and we get that well test. So, but I want to be able to have some wiggle room, because we know that sometimes November can be dry. And since this is not a requirement that from our groundwater study, it's not a requirement that we test, I think that we have some lenience for time. So rather than getting rid of all citation of that, I would like to have that line be edited. The coastal permit administrator may require testing to occur within the dry season. I'm going to give one more line of commentary, and I know, I'm sorry, I'm talking a ton, but it's kind of complicated. Well, maybe it's not complicated, but the last line of commentary is that, as CPA Krog knows, I've been very honored to be a part of the groundwater guidelines updates technical advisory group, and I'm aware that one of the proposals, the draft proposals presented to the county by the consulting hydrologist last spring, was to refine the methodology for testing, which includes having varying the pumping factors relative to the maximum daily demand depending on what time of year. So we could test at any time of year. During the driest time of year, the pumping rate would be the 1.0 factor of, I'm going to totally get it wrong, maximum average daily demand or something, 1.0. And then in the shoulder months before and after that driest time, it's 1.5. And then during the winter, our wet season, they would say, okay, pump twice as much. And that should take care of the variability of the water that's coming into the groundwater table. So that is why I believe that our proposed edit for condition number 14, asking that that second to last sentence be modified to read: the coastal permit administrator may require testing to occur within the dry season. I believe that there's scientific basis for that in unpublished, of course, research, but that the kind of the more accepted and maybe legal citation where we're currently pointing to the current coastal groundwater guidelines allows for us to go from no study to something, and hoping that this could be it. That's a super long narrative. When Chi Sullivan is on the line, I would love for her to give her narrative about the family and her history. It's a heck of a lot shorter than my 3 requests. So if she is here, I'd love for her to raise her hand. And of course, we're available for questions and comments. And if she is not here, then I can read the commentary. So thank you for your patience.
Thank you. And she is here and has raised their hand. So please go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Chi Sullivan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I wanted to give a little bit more of the narrative regarding the house. So the house was built in 1976 by my grandma Coffee, and my grandma Coffee was pretty much my adopted grandmother. She actually did a public health project in Korea in 1974, which is when my parents met up with her. And when they came to the States, we had a very close relationship with her. I mean, we spent pretty much every weekend with her. So, I'm closer to her than I was to my actual grandparents. But we've been coming up to the house since it was built. So it's been, in the same family ever since. And, we would go up to the house and spend most of our weekends there, at least one weekend per month, until I went away to college. And we'd play board games. We'd end up doing cards. And so it's a place of really happy memories for me. And it reminds me a lot of my grandma Coffee. When she passed away in 2005, she left the house to 6 of us in a trust. So there was 3 Coffees, her 2 nephews and a niece, as well as my family, which was my mom, myself, and my brother. And she left it in a trust, so it covered expenses for a little over 5 years. So that's everyone stayed in that trust for a while, but at that end of the year period, because different people had different financial circumstances, and my brother actually lives out on the East Coast, so he doesn't get to see the house very much. 4 of the 6 people ended up selling their shares too, so that my mom and I and then my husband is now also the remaining owners in the house, and the house is set up on an LLC because of the multiple owners. The house carries a ton of sentimental value for us. So it's for us, the house is irreplaceable. And for us, it's really important that we preserve all of these elements in the house so that it's habitable and it being able to be enjoyed by, my husband and I, as well as my parents and my kids too, who are now teenagers. And we're hoping that we can continue to enjoy the house for, at least the next generation to come.
Well, great. Thank you for that history. And always nice to hear when a house has stayed in the family for as many years as it has. So let's see. I'm going to come back to Amy's comments. And I'm actually going to have a question for staff as a result. And then we might also open up the public hearing here and hear from other members of the public before delving into it further. But with the appeal that was filed by the Coastal Commission, was any portion of that appeal specifically related to demonstration of adequate water for the primary residence, or was it focused on the accessory dwelling unit?
It was focused on the accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah. Okay. And then has the commission weighed in at all on the language in condition 14 as currently written, or any comments regarding requirements for water testing or anything along those lines?
The only correspondence I've had is just I have the commission has asked me whether or not testing would occur during the dry season, or during the appropriate testing season, as they put it. And that's really all. They haven't commented on this specific condition or
Sure.
the project as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. So then, Amy, so I think I understand what you're asking for in terms of the revision, and I actually think though that the coastal groundwater development guidelines are the ones that do specify for proof of water testing during the dry summer months, and I'm going to look to staff to confirm that for me. Is that
That's
your
correct.
understanding as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm actually thinking that it may not be necessary that we have a specific separate line that talks about the timing of the testing, because we say in the previous sentence that the well shall be drilled and tested in accordance with the County of Mendocino coastal groundwater development guidelines. And then in terms of the interpretation piece, as you know, you hit on a very a long-standing topic between the county and coastal commission, where, you know, our county coastal groundwater development guidelines say exactly like you said, that no proof of water is required for single-family homes on existing lots of record. And but the commission has often interpreted that you still have to demonstrate adequacy of water prior to approving development, though that's mainly what we've seen in the instances where there's a new residence being proposed as opposed to serving an existing residence. So my only hesitation in telling you definitively about what an interpretation may be by the county is that I think that it may be something that would be appropriate to have conversation with the commission as well, if we're looking to resolve through this modification any appeal that's on file with the coastal commission. So I don't know if any dialogue that maybe you've had on your end has surrounded any testing requirements for the primary residents in this well, and that might help me in sort of sorting through how we move forward today.
Thank you, Director Krog, CPA Krog today. I have not had any specific conversation with the Coastal Commission about testing for the well or wells on this particular project, but I do have examples in the past of when the commission staff have accepted or not appealed tests that are not, you know, for a proposed single family residence that are not the full proof of water test. They have accepted, you know, a 4-hour test. They've accepted a well driller's report. That may be changing, but that is what we have experienced in the past, is that there has been variability in what they have accepted as demonstration of proof of adequate water.
I understand your point. Like, we're not demonstrating for a new residence to be located. We're demonstrating for serving an existing residence on the property. I just don't want to put, you know, the applicant in a situation where you're not actually resolving the concerns from the Coastal Commission as well. So I'm wondering if possibly adding in some like qualifier language saying, you know, looking at the sentence, the well shall be drilled and tested in accordance with the County of Mendocino Coastal Groundwater Development Guidelines. Almost if it says if required, because, you know, I don't know that the commission would also come back saying that it is required that you must perform that testing consistent with those coastal groundwater development guidelines.
Okay.
So I'll look to staff think about that, agent think about that, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing, and then we'll come back around to it. So, okay, so with that, I'm going to open the public hearing and see if we have any members of the public that wish to speak on this item. And if you do, please indicate so by using the raise hand feature. And I'm seeing no hands being raised. We have no members of the public in the room. Okay, well, that was quick. We're coming back to the Coastal Permit Administrator. So then I'm going to first look to staff and see, staff, do you have any recommendations or any concerns with adding a qualifier onto that sentence just to provide a bit more flexibility so that that discussion can continue to happen between the county commission and the agent applicant regarding what testing is required?
Yeah, no, I don't have concerns with that. And really, I think from my perspective, the purpose of the testing is really to, first and foremost, ensure that no more wells are drilled than necessary,
Yeah.
Rather than showing that there's an adequate water supply to serve the existing residents. Because as we've said, the residence is already there.
Yes.
And I guess, the property owner sort of would run the risk themselves in when they would test or how they would test to figure out whether or not there's enough water to serve that residence. But for me, the concern is more with making sure that drilling stops when it should stop and when there's been enough water demonstrated. So yeah, I don't have any issues with that, adding that language.
Okay. And then I'll look back to the applicant and agent and see if you have any comments or if that sounds all right to you to add the if required language. And then also I'm thinking we can strike the sentence after that talks about testing occurring during the dry season.
Sam Walden.
Thank you, CPA Krog. Yes, that language is acceptable. The if required and striking, we would be supportive of that as well. So thank you.
Okay, great. And I do see we have a hand raised from Sam Waldman, and I believe he's associated with the application. So go ahead, Sam, and just state your name for the record and any comments you may have.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I just had a question about the timing of the Coastal Commission's response to this as required clause, which sounds fine in terms of the county's presentation, but is there a time limit within which they can impose a requirement?
So the only if action is taken today, then the only time limit would be about their associated appeal period. So the commission, certainly I think there could be dialogue happening between now and the conclusion of any appeal periods associated with the project to make sure everybody's clear on what those requirements are. The alternative is to have that discussion before action is taken. And with that, I think I would defer to if the applicant on that, realizing that we are, in September, and I'm sure you're anxious to have a more sustainable water source as well.
I can speak to that, Amy Wynn. We are fine with action being taken now with the language proposed by CPA Krog. I think that we can work with the county and the commission staff within this time frame to clarify what will work. I think they'll accept what we need for leniency.
Okay, great. All right, so with that, just confirming I didn't miss any other items that you raised, Amy. I think I hit them all. Oh, and
just the one, the or.
Yeah, the or.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to bring it back to the Coastal Permit Administrator, and thank you to staff for the detailed staff report and presentation. And I will adopt the mitigated negative declaration for this project and approve the project subject to the findings and conditions as modified during today's hearing, and with the revised project description per the memo, except for adding in the word or. So to allow for 2,500 gallon water storage tanks or a 5,000 gallon tank. And with that, the project is approved.
Thank you so much. We very much appreciate your time and consideration.
Okay. And moving on with our agenda, are there any, item number 4, any matters from staff? Okay, great. Number 5, matters from the public. The Coastal Permit Administrator welcomes participation in meetings. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the Coastal Permit Administrator, which are not on the posted agenda, and items which have not already been considered by the Coastal Permit Administrator. No action will be taken. Do we have any matters from the public? And you can indicate so by using the raise hand feature. I'm seeing none. Okay, so then we will adjourn the meeting at 10:52 a.m. Thank you.
Right.